Yud Kislev, I'm sure you know, is a Chag HaGeula. We celebrate the freedom of the Mittel Rebbe. All Geulas of the Rabbeim, Mittel Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek also had a Chag HaGeula, the Frierdiker Rebbe. All Geulas of the Rabbeim is directly related to their teachings, directly related to the Geula, to the dissemination of Chassidus, dissemination, bringing forth and revealing to everyone, teaching openly. It's an odd thing. There are so many different philosophies in the world. And for some reason, when it came to teaching Chassidus, which is, in addition to being a very profound way of serving Hashem, is also
profound,
deep.
Okay.
Is also a very deep philosophy. It's not an illogical approach, an irrational approach. It's a very systematic, very well presented approach to life. And yet, there is such an enormous opposition to it. It started with the Baal Shem Tov, and then the Maggid, and then the Alter Rebbe, who suffered for it enormously. The Mittel Rebbe, Tzemach Tzedek, throughout. And thus, we have to understand that the opposition to Chassidus is not a simple worldly thing. Because who could care? It could care less as far as how you learn or what you do. The opposition to Chassidus is rooted. It means it originates in an opposition to Chassidus the way it is Lamaila, above the world, in a higher world.
Opposition is like opposite?
Yeah, opposition means be opposite, right. And the reason for that opposition, I'm very glad you asked me to that, because I don't want to talk to the walls. I want to talk to human beings. Without Chassidus, the Yetzer Hara and the Satan and the world still can maintain, everybody knows, will keep its place. If, for instance, you have to do mitzvahs, you have to put on tefillin. So how long does it take to put on tefillin and done? An hour, 2 hours? After you're finished, then you go out and say, okay, now you belong to the world. Now I have to go out to work and be a man amongst men, a person amongst persons, a human being amongst human beings. One of the credos, one of the principles that started in Germany by the Reform movement. I want you to know that the Reform, what we have today, Reform, that know nothing, zero about the Yiddishkeit, they started from great Jewish scholars. Scholars, Talmidei Chachamim. And they were even religious. They put on tefillin, kept Shabbos, and ate kosher. But they had this very erroneous, very mistaken approach. And they said that you have to combine being Jewish with being a man of the world. And one of their statements was, be Jewish in your home and be a man in the street. In the street you don't have to show your Yiddishkeit. Be one of everybody else, like everybody else. And it didn't take more than one generation where from them came, their children became completely goyim. They converted, completely broke away from Yiddishkeit. So this was an extreme, but generally speaking, if we take Yiddishkeit just only on the external action level, keep kosher, keep Shabbos, put on tefillin, so forth, there's always room for the other part of life, for the other part of the world. So you actually live in the world, but you live a certain lifestyle. It's called a lifestyle. But Torah and Yiddishkeit and Hashem, this is not a lifestyle. This is the presentation of the absolute, complete, total truth that does not allow for any other. We say Hashem Echod, we close our eyes, with closed eyes, we say Hashem Echod. In other words, I don't need any proof for it. I close my eyes, I know this one single truth, and there is absolutely nothing second to it. That's the principle of Yiddishkeit. In the human being, in the person, just like in his day, there is the early morning, when he first wakes up, and first orients himself, or gets realized where he is, what he's supposed to do, then in the middle of the day, then he comes at the end of the day. Same thing within the person himself. There is his mind, his thought, then his mouth, his hands, his feet, his heart, all different parts, all different levels. And it is possible to do everything that you have to do with your hands and with your mouth. But your mind and your heart should be elsewhere. How many of you have experienced saying Ashrei and then not knowing, did I say Ashrei or I didn't say it? Okay? You're the only one who's not smiling.
No, I never did that.
You never did that. It's possible. Not only is this possible, but the Shulchan Aruch speaks about just such a case.
I'm doing it right now.
You're doing it right now?
I think I just said Ashrei. I'm not sure.
The Shulchan Aruch speaks about the case where a person is saying Shema Yisrael, and he comes to Ukshartam Leis Al Yodecha, and he doesn't know whether it's the first Ukshartam or the second Ukshartam. So all of this is possible. And with that setup and that level of involvement, the Satan, the Yetzer Hara, the world can make peace with that. Say, you have your room, I have my room. Everybody has place. You're not really taking over the world. In every person there's room for something else. Chassidus, the Baal Shem Tov, starting from the Baal Shem Tov, and then going to the Alter Rebbe, who had developed and brought out even a deeper way to express it. The Baal Shem Tov said that in every Jew there is a neshama. He lives from a neshama. It's not his feet, it's not his hands, it's not his head. There's a neshama that gives him life. And this neshama, the Baal Shem Tov explained, this neshama is equal, is the very same in his head and in his feet. And with this approach, with this idea, the Baal Shem Tov, in effect, said, there is not a part in the person that's outside of Kiddush, that's outside of holiness, outside of Yiddishkeit. There isn't. Because it's the same neshama, the same spark that permeates, that goes through and through in the entire person. And the Baal Shem Tov, as a result, says that a Yid, a simple Yid, who davenus to Hashem, or does a mitzvah, with pure simplicity. Simplicity means simply because he knows that a Yid is supposed to do this. He doesn't understand anything else. He doesn't have great intellectual insight. He knows that he is a Yid. His father was a Yid, and his grandfather was a Yid, and going all the way up to Avraham Avinu. And a Yid is supposed to live like this. And with this simplicity, he lives his life. He says that this simple Yid is actually representing in his actions the very pure soul that is living in him. He's not doing it for any other reason. It's a direct reflection. It's like the sun shining through the window. The sun is shining through the window, but it's not the window that's shining. It's the sun. It's the same sun. So he has a small window. In other words, he doesn't really understand much, but it's the same. It's the pure shine of the neshama that goes through. And as a result, he says, this permeates, this goes through the entire person, and his mitzvahs can be superior, higher, greater than the mitzvahs done by a great scholar who examines, who first figures out, what does it mean? Do I agree with it? Does it make sense? This is right in the beginning of the Baal Shem Tov. And you can imagine, we can readily understand that when you present the Yiddishkeit, you present a Yid from that perspective, with that power, with that purity, not leaving anything out, not allowing for any intermixture of anything else, because this is his whole neshama. There is going to be great opposition from the world.
Well, Shem Tov comes like a solution for that situation. We are choosing in our house a human person in the street. Will Shem Tov come for bring a solution for that?
Yeah. This was the beginning of Chassidus in the Middle Baal Shem Tov. And in fact, there was tremendous opposition. I want to take a step away a little bit and to explain, we should have a real handle on this. A handle. Yeah, we should be able to actually see it and relate to it. It says in Tehillim that there is the Hashem's enemies. Oivei Hashem, Oivei Hashem. And who are the Oivim Hashem? It says, Al Amcho Yarimu Soit, that they are attacking your nation. So Rashi explains that anyone who attacks the Jewish nation, what they really are attacking, what they really hate, what they're really trying to destroy, is Hashem. They're really enemies of Hashem. And they're attacking the Jewish nation because the Jewish nation represents Hashem in this world. And that's why they're attacking the Jewish nation. Now this is something which seems a little bit far-fetched. I mean, the Jewish nation are people like all other people. They eat, they sleep, they work, they're pretty good business people. Why do we say that the Jewish people, they represent Hashem? So, some time ago, we discussed this. Not exactly from this angle, but a similar thing. You can have a Yid seemingly doing exactly the same thing like anybody else. He does business, he works, he builds himself a nice home, and even has a boat. He really lives it up in this world. Right? He's completely imbued in this world. And yet, there is a very principal difference. And the difference is not so easy to see, but the guy, he sees it very clearly. This was such a manifest thing that during the Second World War, there were Yidden who disowned, who broke away from Yiddishkeit for generations, for 2 generations. And the Nazis came and said, no, you are Jewish. And they killed them together with everybody else. Jews were converted. And they brought them back and said, no, you're Jewish. What's so special in this? There is something very special. And this is something which we ourselves don't even begin to appreciate what we have. The best way for me to illustrate this is with something which we quoted many times from the Rebbe.
Quoted many times from what?
From the Rebbe. I'm sure you will all remember this. I recall it all the time. But the Rebbe was asked whether it's possible there should be a nuclear war. And the Rebbe said it's possible. And then the person asked, in that case the world will be destroyed. And the Rebbe said, no, that's not possible. That's not rational. That doesn't make sense. Nuclear war can destroy the whole world. There's enough in the arsenals of any country, America, Russia, even probably China has enough to destroy the whole world. Nuclear war is mind-boggling what it can do. Never said, but to destroy the world is not possible. Why? Because the world is not based on natural resources. Based. It's not built on natural basis, on natural foundation. Anything that's built on natural foundation, you can destroy. The world is not based on natural foundation, natural strength. The world is representing Hashem's will. Hashem wants the world. And that is not destructible. It's impossible to destroy the world. We can't make sense of it physically, rationally, but that's the truth. It's an indestructible, it's an entity, because it represents God's will. That is symbolic of the difference between a Yidden and a Goy. They can both live a normal life. A Yid, with his own very soul, with his very life, represents a presence, a life, a spirit that is indestructible. And this is something which the Goy cannot stand. I mean, indestructible. Everything in the world is destructible. Why don't you join everybody else and struggle with all of us in the same dirt? Why are you floating up higher? Why do you consider yourself indestructible? We don't consider, we are indestructible. This is our soul. And as a result of that, a Yid who is lost to Yiddishkeit, he doesn't know anything. But in his soul, in his very thought, in his very spirit, he carries that same spirit. And it does represent Hashem's presence in the world, which is indestructible. And a Goy will always identify a Yid, no matter how much the Yid will try to be equal with him. Because he cannot be Yid. He floats right up, just like oil. Can you mix oil with any liquid? You can tumble it, and oil will always spring up. You can't mix. This is what the Baal Shem Tov revealed. He taught. He says that we have to look into the soul of a Yid, not into his intellect. That does not really represent him. And that's why there was tremendous opposition, because he is taking a Yid out of the natural limits of the world. And his Alshi is saying, outright, this is an indestructible entity. This is something which cannot drown in the world. And this created tremendous opposition. Lamaila, the Satan, and as a result, it resulted in tremendous opposition here in this world. The Alter Rebbe wrote the Tanya. The Alter Rebbe taught. I'm going to explain a little bit about Chassidus Chabad in a moment, but I'm just in this context. The Alter Rebbe wrote the Tanya. The Tanya, I don't have to tell you, the Tanya embodies, it contains, it represents a clear, a pure directive for Jewish life, for true and pure life. For an average person, for a Beinoni, it cuts right through the mud and the dirt of the world and shows a Yidden how to live a pure life, no matter who he is, whatever level he is, he'll find himself in the Tanya. We all know in our time about Tshuva. What is the first thing? What is his first love when it comes to Yiddishkeit? The Tanya. They can't have enough of it. For the Tanya, the Alter Rebbe was put in prison, and he suffered. For the Tanya, for Eloya, his daughter died, and there was untold suffering. Why? For the same reason. Because it brought Chassidus, and as a result Yiddishkeit and Avodas Hashem, to a level that reveals it at a level that does not allow it to be mixed up, allow it to become lost or mixed, joined with anything else. It becomes pure, straight Yiddishkeit. Not a combination, not a deal maker. There was in Russia, you all know that Russia, Baruch Hashem, now this whole nightmare has lifted. But Russia was a real nightmare for 70 years, a real nightmare.
Nightmare.
What language is that?
Spanish.
So there is nightmare in Spanish too, right? We're coming to Hanukkah. And Hanukkah, we play dreidel, we play cards and dreidel with money. And you know why we play dreidel Hanukkah? Because it was forbidden during Hanukkah, the Yevonim forbade teaching children Torah. And when they had little groups of the Chadorim, and they learned Torah with children. So when the soldiers would arrive, so the children would hide the Sforim, and they would sit down and play dreidel. They would play games. And this is why we play dreidel on Hanukkah. To mark, to remind us that this is how Eden lived under the Yevonim during the second Beis Hamikdash in Hanukkah. So Hanukkah was a very difficult time. It pales, it doesn't compare to what we went through more recently under communism. No comparison. I myself, personally, was involved in one of these instances. I was in Cheder in Tashkent, and there was a little room, like in a semi-basement. You know what a semi-basement is? Where part of the wall is under the ground, and then there's a couple of windows, like a basement, not a deep basement, but a semi-basement. And we had this little cheder. I don't remember how many boys there were. Maybe there were a total of 7 boys. Among these 7 boys, there were several groups. There were beginners, there were boys who were a little higher level, and boys who were on a higher level. And At all times, there was one boy assigned to stand and watch through the window. And if anyone is coming towards this room, towards this house, he should alert, he should tell the Rebbe that somebody is coming. I was a little boy. I was the youngest over there. And one time it was my assignment. It was my job. I was eating lunch, and I was told, watch the window. If somebody is coming, tell me. Right? I had no idea what it was about. So I was watching this window, and I see a young couple, a man and a woman, are approaching this room. And I look back and I see the Rebbe learning with the children. And I was a very proper boy. I wouldn't interrupt anyone in the middle of talking. But then I thought to myself, I look back, they're coming. I thought to myself, I was told to tell him, so I have to tell him. So I went against and I said, with half my heart, somebody is coming. Just like that. All of a sudden, they were learning Gemara, they took the Gemaras, and if it took 10 seconds, there was nothing there. Nothing. It was all stashed away, pre-assigned places. I was stunned. I couldn't understand what was happening. Everything was stashed away, and the kids were sitting on the floor and playing dreidel. And this couple came in and looked around, and the Rebbe had a big white beard. So they looked around and they smiled, and they said, oh, you're playing Santa Claus. And they walked away. They walked out.
The Rebbe, you say?
What?
The Rebbe Joseph Iskak was with you?
No, the teacher. The teacher, the Rebbe, the teacher from that class. After they walked out, the Rebbe, for that day, he canceled class. He was afraid already to sit. He canceled the rest of the day. Everybody went home. I couldn't understand what it was about. And that was the end of that day. And the next day, of course, we got back together. I still wasn't sure what was happening. I mean, later on I understood this was a big sakona and so forth. But years later, in the meantime, we, with Hashem's help, got out of Russia. We came over to America. I was a little boy then, I was 7 years old. I came over in America, and I got married. So one time, Yom Kippur night to Kol Nidre, I was wearing the talis, I was wearing the white kittel, and with a big beard. And I see a Yid coming into 770, and I said to myself, I think this was my Rebbe in Tashkent. Looks like my Rebbe. So after Kol Nidre, after davening, I walked over to him and I said, Shalom Aleichem. He looked at me and he says, Abba, do you remember how you saved my life? Then I understood that it was real. I mean, I understood the whole time. But this was this is how you lived. He remembered 20 years later, not 20, whatever it is, 15, 17 years later. Because this is how we lived. This was Russia. You can imagine that, okay, so I started telling you a story in Russia. So this was a very difficult time. you needed real Mesiras Nefesh. And ultimately, you needed the power of Chassidus. Something that goes through and through the person who cannot see any other world to be able to survive this. So with this story, there was a Yid who was a Rav, a Lamb. He knew how to learn. And this Yid was giving a shir every day. He would come to shul, and he would give a shir, Mishnayos or Yankiv, I don't remember what it was. He was a real scholar, a real Talmid Chacham. But he had the same difficulty like everybody else. You have to have parnasa. And Shabbos, you can't, there's no such thing as not coming to work on Shabbos. So he became a conductor on the train. That itself is plenty of an insult. A Rav became a conductor. What conductor means? Somebody who stands there, who takes your tickets, and a conductor. And he made different kind of calculations, halachically, that he is not really over, he's not really transgressing on a severe Chilul Shabbos, which was probably true, which was not severe, transgressing on Isa de Raisa. But in the meantime, he went to work, and he did all the work that he had to do. He said muktzeh, he said this is not the same as making a fire on Shabbos, you know what I'm saying? And this went on for a while. And the people in the shul didn't know it. They thought that he was like, he withstood the temptation, the nisoyin. And he was a Yid Hashem Ateva Meshem Shabbos.
This was in America or in Russia?
This was in Russia. This was in Russia under the most severe circumstances. And he was very difficult, it was a very difficult nisayon. But one time, one of the simple Yidden, one of the Siddish Yidden, found out that he actually went to work on Shabbos and he did all of that. And then he came to shul to give his shir, and this Yid got up and he said, "You are going to give a shir over here? Never. You're not going to give a shir over here." Now this, I have to understand, it was a tremendous nisayon. It was not an easy thing. Nevertheless, a Yid by whom the neshama shines through, he doesn't know any combination. He doesn't know any way to combine and to compromise. Shabbos has to be Shabbos, and if Shabbos is not a holy day, then you don't give a shir. Maybe we'll interrupt and sing a nigun to make it official of Abrengen. And then we'll pick up again. Everybody ready? But don't go too high so we can follow you. Keep up with you.
I don't really know that. I don't know all the words that well, but
Get a teenage. Get a teenage. Here.
I have one too.
Kapitel Nun Hey. You can all take teenage. Shnei Zalman, you're awake? You going to help him? Can you help out? You're also a Nagel. What? Sorry? Pod of Shalom. You know it?
No entendía algo. Cuando se acercó el maestro,
Yeah, you pass.
20 años después, el maestro
Wait.
se acercó. ¿Qué fue lo que le contestó el maestro?
This has it? Yeah?
Most of the benches should have it in the back.
In the back? I can't see it because...
Most of them are in alphabetical order.
Everybody find it in these benches? We found it. Give us adversary secret. In any case, you have a team. Take a team back. I can't find it. What? Oh, here it is. Page 27. Page 27 on the right side here. On the shoulder. Ready? La Okay, so this great revelation that Baal Shem Tov, this changed the entire face of the Jewish situation, and it brought tremendous brightness, light into the Jewish community. Where we even started to do mitzvahs, to live Jewish life with tremendous joy, because their life reflected their neshama. The entire mode, the entire way of living changed tremendously. Then came the Alter Rebbe. What was the union of the Alter Rebbe? The truth is, as we said, that every Yid has a neshama. And the neshama gives him life, someplace hidden in his mind's crevices. But you have to what's called kindle the neshama. You have to bring it out. You have to bring it to light. So, what the Baal Shem Tov had set up, and his Talmidim after him, and the Maggid and his Talmidim after him, what they had set up was that the Rebbe would be the one who would kindle the neshama of every Yid. They had spread out throughout Russia and the Ukraine and Poland and went all the way even into Germany. The people that came in touch with them were affected by their spirit, and as a result of that, their neshamas also came to life, and they also began to shine with bright light. So this was very, very powerful and very true. But nevertheless, what this represented was that excuse me, that in these simple Yidden, or in these people, the Chassidim, who were kindled by their Rebbe, it is true that their neshamas came to light. But their neshamas came to light by a fire from outside. Within their own bodies, within themselves, they could not light up the neshama. In other words, at their own level, in their own understanding and view of the world, they were not able to see and to see through the world and to be able to reveal and come in contact with the neshama. It had to be the Rebbe who kindles it. And therefore, that meant that it is the neshama shining, it's true, but there was still something, some obstacle, something in the person that was not really part of it. The only thing is that they were able to bypass it, ignore the kashas and all the things that may be presented to them as obstacles, because they had a brighter light, a light coming straight to the neshama, and they were able to ignore everything. Ignoring is not the same as transforming, as bringing into the fray, into the action. The Alter Rebbe said that that's not enough. And what we need is to present Chassidus in such a way that everyone can kindle his own neshama with the help of the Rebbe, but he can work internally with his own intellect and with his own emotion and learn and reflect and contemplate until he reaches and touches his neshama.
Till what?
Contemplate. That was you asking? Contemplate means think. And for this purpose, the Alter Rebbe have developed what we know as Chassidus Chabad. Chassidus Chabad stands for Chochmah, Bina, V'das, which means that the principles of the bright light of the Baal Shem Tov, the Chassidus that the Baal Shem Tov taught, the Alter Rebbe presented it in an organized manner such that one can actually learn, understand what's behind it, not just be kindled, be excited, but really understand what it's about. And then, with his own mind, reflect on it. And what we call be mizboinen, which we discuss in class all the time. Mizboinen means he should actually delve into it, go into it and think with his own mind very deeply to the point where it becomes real. And through that he should reach his neshama. This represented a completely new revelation in Chassidus and in Yiddishkeit. The way it is described in general, this is the difference between Pnimius and Makif. Makif means something that shines from outside, and it's very bright, but it comes from outside.
What is bright?
Light,
Bahir.
shine, Bahir. The Alter Rebbe says that's not enough. It has to be something that goes through the person's mind, and he actually asks the question and gets an answer, asks another question, gets another answer, until everything becomes clear in his mind. And then he is misboinen, he contemplates, he reflects on it, until he personally relates to it, he personally understands it, and it becomes his own truth. And through that, he reveals the koyach of his neshama.
Koyach.
Power. This was the Chassidus Chabad. This really changed the entire face of Chassidus. And that's why there was enormous opposition, enormous struggle to establish this Chassidus. As much as there was opposition and struggle to establish the general Chassidus and the Baal Shem Tov and Maggid, there was much more opposition in establishing Chassidus Chabad. And this opposition was not only from outside of Yiddishkeit, it was from within Yiddishkeit. And not only was it within Yiddishkeit, it was within Chassidus. There were many Hasidic Rebbes, the Alter Rebbe's colleagues, who were very much against it. And it was a very difficult struggle to establish it. But the Alter Rebbe insisted on it, and he was Moshe Nefesh for it. And we today, 200 years later, or 250 years later, know how tremendously necessary this was, and tremendously powerful this is, and how effective it is. Because we know, for instance, again going back to Russia, that previous century, the 70 years that Russia was under communism, and in most intolerable circumstances, the only group of Jews that survived and was able to withstand all the nisyonis was the Chabad group. Nobody else was able to live up to this extent. Anyone who survived in Russia, survived Jewishly in Russia, was either a Chabadnik or was attached. He came in contact, and he was held together. He came in contact and joined the Chabad. Because the Chassidus Chabad, this is the real thing. This is that which truly permeates, goes right into the person's mind, goes right into the person's bones. It becomes his reality. And it completely changes his whole perspective, his whole view of the world, changes his whole view of his own life. And there is nothing left outside of Torah, outside of Yiddishkeit. Not that he makes a small world. On the contrary, he makes a big, big world. Everything you learn in Chassidus Chabad, you see that in Chassidus, one of the things that is so open in Chassidus is that to explain sometimes the finest and the most subtle, the most gentle spiritual ideas, we use physical examples. The most simple physical examples. Why is that? Because Chassidus has revealed that the whole world and everything in the world, every aspect of the natural world, is all reflecting the spiritual world. And it conforms. It is an actual moshel. Everything in the world is a moshel for a spiritual thing. It is not just we find something similar just to learn about it. It is truly a moshel for it.
Moshel.
A moshel, an example, an illustration. I want to give you a moshel, an illustration from halacha. Shabbos, you're not allowed to do a malacha, right? You're not allowed to do work on Shabbos. What is a malacha? What's the definition of malacha? Memtes malachas of that one is amidas in Mishkan. That we know because that's what the Torah teaches us. But what is a malacha from the world perspective? What would you think is a malacha?
Something that requires effort.
Something required that makes you sweat, right? Makes you tired, or something that you don't like to do.
Watching TV is not.
Huh?
Watching TV is not malacha.
Watching TV is not malacha. Switching on the TV is not malacha. Switching the light is not a malacha. Driving a car is a pleasure. Right? What kind of malacha is that? Carrying a handkerchief? There is a Reshus HaYochid and Reshus HaRabbi. You all know that, right? What's a Reshus HaYochid? A Reshus HaYochid is an area that was fenced off. And how tall does the fence have to be?
10 tefachim.
10 tefachim. 10 tefachim is approximately 2 feet. If it's 2 feet tall, that makes it a Reshus HaYochid. You can't pass a 2 foot wall. How can you pass a 2 foot wall? Makes it a Reshus HaYochid. And if you carry from this Reshus HaYochid into the Reshus HaRabim, it's a capital sin. It's a mamash. You have a Mechal Shabbos. You get skilled for this. What do we see from this? That the physical world, the way Torah looks at it, is not defined by its physicality. It's defined by Torah definition. What is work by Torah definition? Work is something, it said Lametes Meloches, but essentially this Lametes Meloches is something that has a creative quality. quality, that you make something, you create something. If you take a heavy load and you move it from one corner of the house to another corner of the house, you work very hard from a person's point of view, but you have not really accomplished anything in terms of changing its place. If you take a needle from the house into the street, you are transferring it from Reshus HaYochid, from something that is a separate domain to another domain. And that's us. The whole world and everything in the world has a Torah definition. It's a Torah view. And Hasidus brings this out. Hasidus Chabad, particularly, brings this out in the richest and the most far-reaching ways, where everything that we come in contact with becomes a way to understand something deeper, to understand the Hasidus. And therefore, and thereby, looking at the whole world and being involved in the world does not interfere, does not confuse, does not block the view to see through and through and to see that actually what is keeping it, what's maintaining it, what is giving it chayas, is a spiritual chayas, the spirit del alakus. The other day I was talking to someone, whatever the topic was, I needed to explain something to him. He was very concerned about what's going on, whatever, concerned, worried in our world. And so I said to him, look, now think about this. You're sitting in a house. This house is maybe 100 years old. I don't know about this house, but the house we were sitting in was about 110 years old. It was a good, solid house, made, of brick. And it doesn't show any age. It's really solid. And it's standing 100 years. So you would say, it was so well built that it stands at 100 years. True. And we discussed, I pointed out to various parts of the house and so forth. Then I asked him a question, tell me, of all the things that you see in the house, what is the major, what major means? The most important contributor in the solidity, in the fact that the house stands. You know what it is? It is the gravitational pull of the earth.
Gravitation?
Gravity. If you use the gravitational pull of the earth properly, and you set up the bricks straight, the house is going to stand. You don't see it. You don't do it. But that's the real thing that keeps it standing. We do all kinds of different things. And all kinds of things that we come in contact with in the world. What is the essence of all that? What makes it all work? What gives it all the chayes? the very basis of all the existence. And this is what Chassidus reveals to us and makes us see it and understand it. The whole spirit and power that permeates, goes through everything that exists and makes it stand solid and strong, is the godly spark. The godly presence. This is what the essence of everything. This is what we mentioned before. The world is indestructible. You think the world stands on politics, on nature, on cell phones. There is a spark, there's a spirit, there's a godly presence in the world. And this is what keeps it all going. Just like in a person. A person has seichel and midas, and he has feet, and he can run, and he can jump, and he can scream, and he can argue, and he can fight, he can do anything of the things. What carries it all? What's the highest? What gives it all possible? What makes it all possible? There's an neshama. He doesn't even pay attention to it. He doesn't even notice it. The spirit of the neshama is that which allows all of this to happen. Chassidus allows us to come face to face and to understand this and to recognize this in every aspect of our lives. And gives us the ability to face up to every different situation in the world and never think for a second, oh, this situation, God never thought of this. This is something novel. It was invented by whoever. You can see right through it and see how this all is rooted and all represents a godly spirit, godly spark, and how it can be used for Yiddishkeit. This is one of the great things that the Rebbe spoke about. The Rebbe spoke very strongly about the fact that we have found the waves of radio. So today you take radio for granted, but just about not that long ago, 100 years ago, this was a big, big novelty. And people were astounded. Wow, we can hear something that is spoken thousands of miles away instantaneously. This is unbelievable. Human miracle. And the Rebbe then said that this is truly a wonderful thing that human beings were able to discover it, but this is a godly creation. And this represents the fact that the world is really all one. This is why it's possible to know here, to hear over here what is happening around the globe. And today it's not only to hear, but to see instantaneously. Because it's really all one thing. And it is meant, the revelation and the finding of it is meant to further reveal to us and show us the unity that exists in the world. Contrary to what one may think from a worldly perspective, now we have broken away from Torah, we've broken away from the limits, so to speak, of Yiddishkeit. We have something in the world that Yiddishkeit has nothing to do with it. No, it's exactly there in the Torah, in the Yiddishkeit. And it's meant entirely for the purpose of carrying the message. across the globe. And on the contrary, it reveals even more profoundly, more clearly, the inyan von Achdus Hashem. Instead of being an obstacle, it becomes a revelation. This is what we received on Yutas Kislev and on Yud Kislev. And this is why this is a tremendous holiday, a tremendously special day. We, in our generation, which is said 200 years later, are benefiting from this immeasurably. Chassidus Chabad is what facilitated, what made it possible for people like us here who had no exposure to Yiddishkeit whatsoever. Like on the normal circumstance, you're supposed to have it when you're a young child and everything, when you can accept everything smoothly and straightforwardly. And they didn't have it. And on the contrary, they were exposed to completely counter-opposite ideas. And with Chassidus Chabad, they were able to come back and to relate to it and to understand it and to become one with it and to become like young children, as free and as fully united, seamlessly united. You know what seamlessly? What seamless means? You know what seamless means?
But united now.
What?
United, you say.
Seamlessly, without a seam, without, you don't see that two things. Right. Like one thing. Even though you were an adult, you had a whole life before. See, this permits you to come in and open up and see the reality and not feel that you're a stranger in Torah. This is the biggest blessing that we have today, and this is in fact what the Baal Shem Tov said, that ultimately by the teaching of Chassidus, the dissemination of Chassidus, this is, even before the Rashbi, this is what's going to bring Eden out of Golus. In Mitzvah Hashem, all of us are going to experience it, we're going to see it with our own eyes. First we have to pull ourselves out of the Golus, and then we will pull the whole world out of the Golus. Nu, nog aan liegen. Schnell Salmen.
Yeah.
Alright, lighting your light. And I had Yontov, and now between Yud Kislev and Yutes Kislev, there's essentially these 8 days. It says that, the Rabbi said, Friedrich said that Yud Kislev is the birth, and Yutes Kislev is the Bris Milah. So I don't have time now to go into this, but the point is that it is a period between these 2 days is a period of Geula of Chassidus. In general, you know that Chodesh Kislev has merited to be a month of Chassidish month. To us, today, now we have Rosh Chodesh Kislev, which is a tremendous yom tov for us, because that's when the Rebbe was healed, came out from his heart attack, went home. Now we have Tes Kislev, Yom Holedes from Mitten Rebbe, Yud Kislev, Tes Kislev, and then we have Chanukah. Chanukah is an old yom tov from time when there was Amigdash, second is Amigdash. But Chanukah is also a Chassidische Yom Tov. And the 5th Lichtel, the 3rd Lichtel, and in general Chanukah has a Chassidische principles, Chassidische Inyonim. Maybe during Chanukah we'll have a chance to talk. We should, maybe should help him, and everyone of us should be able to absorb and Chassidus and to understand Chassidus and to bring it into life and brighten up his own life and the life of his friends and the life of the whole world. Have a good evening. It was a pleasure.